All right, we are live, Bible in a Year. Thank you for joining us. If you don't know me, my name is Pastor Zach, and I'm here with Pastor Gerard. And today, you will not be bored. We are going to be talking about weak eyes and mandrakes and deception and
teraphims and
theophanies
and
dysfunction. There's a lot here. So we're going to be in Genesis chapters 29 through 37. And as always, there's no shortage of stuff to talk about. So where do you want to start in chapter 29?
Well, first of all, I'm glad they let us come back, and so that's always good.
Yeah.
That's a positive. Well, as I was read through this, it's amazing. This plays out like an epic movie. You got Jacob and you got Isaac and all these characters that are larger than life, and they're traveling from here and there, and it's like a Western to me. And so I kind of looked at it sort of that way. But I wanted to look at chapter 29, verse 10. And this is when Jacob sees Rachel for the first time. And so I'm going to read it, and we'll go from there. And I think Turbo will put up. And welcome. We're glad you folks are here. Those we do see you. We're not as well versed in this as Pastor Alex is, and he gets to read all those things real quick. But we're glad you're here, and ask your questions, give your comments. We want to see it. But 29 verse 10, it says, when Jacob saw Rachel, daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, cousins again, and Laban's sheep, he went and he rolled the stone away from the mouth of the well and watered his uncle's sheep. So Jacob had come to the well that his fathers and his ancestors had dug, and he came and saw that the stone was so large it wasn't rolled away. And so he asked, well, hey, isn't it time to water the sheep? And the servant said, well, no, we can't roll it away. It's too strong. We don't have the strength. And it's very interesting. As soon as he sees Rachel, which it says she was very beautiful, it's kind of like he went, rah, and he goes and rolls this stone away, and then he goes over to her and he kisses her. What an introduction, right? With that. But the interesting part of this well is this. This is the same well that Christ met the woman at the well. The exact same well.
Yeah.
And going a little further, to my recollection, you can correct me if I'm wrong, after Christ was at that well in John 4, I don't see a well being a subject of anything after that.
Yeah.
Which, wells play such an important part in the Old Testament and the New Testament. But Christ goes on to say, hey, here is this water, and I have water that you know not of, and this living water. And Christ talks about this, and the Samaritan woman wants to go, yes, this is awesome. I don't know about that. But from that point on, we know that Christ, when we accept Christ, the Holy Spirit comes in us. And John 7 says there will be springs of living water that flow out of us. And so now this physical water, and that physical well is not important anymore. We are the well of God. And we bring that. And it all starts here with Jacob showing his manliness and kissing Rachel.
Yeah. It's a great comparison. I mean, wells back in that time was the equivalent of what oil is today. Like water was this very important resource because, where their wealth really was in their livestock.
Yeah.
And what does the livestock need, especially in a more desert type setting? They need water.
Yeah.
And so when you had access to water, the amount of wells you had, how deep the well was, how much water was in there, how pure the water was, these were like very important things. And that's why you would see people congregate, around them, and they would, want different land that had access to more wells.
Right. And Abraham dug like 7 wells, and then when people got mad at him, they filled his wells in.
Can you imagine how infuriating that would be if you went through, because you have to probably dig it in a certain way and maybe line it with certain rocks and stuff along the way, otherwise it's going to collapse in on itself. And imagine you go through the tedious work to dig and build a well, and then someone gets mad at you, and so they come in and they fill it in.
Fill it in.
Yeah.
That would be awful. I'm going to carry the metaphor a little further. Living water needs to constantly be moving. They constantly needed to have the water. It couldn't be stopped up.
Yep.
Sometimes as followers of Christ, the living water within us, we don't allow it to flow any longer. We become ineffective. And for us to be effective for Christ, we have to continuously be filled with that living water and continuously allow it to go on out. And it's just, it's life, right?
Yeah.
So
it makes me think of, I'm going to feel like I'm at our new attenders dinner right now because I always bring this up. But when we have our new attenders dinner, one of the things we talk about is serve opportunities.
Yeah.
And the comparison that I give them is, hey, especially Sunday morning, but church is a time where you're being fed. But after a while, if you don't have an outlet, you become a cesspool.
Yeah.
And so not only this living water metaphor and again, God, but also we have to have an outlet where it's not just about what we're getting. God's giving us something and giving us living water, but we're also supposed to live it out and do something with it too.
That's good. That is very good. So listen, hey, I'm going to give a plug for new attenders dinner. If you're part of Bethel's Rock and you're listening to this and you're new and you're wondering what's going on with this, we're glad you're here. But if you've never been to a new attenders dinner, each of our campuses have those monthly. And I believe this week we are in Apple Valley. I don't know what's happening with you in Farmington. Yep. Sign up for new attenders dinner, meet your pastors, and we just break bread together and just get to know each other a little more. So
yeah, we got a couple of comments. We got, looks like a group of people that are having a sauna party.
Oh, well, there we go.
Hey, it makes sense based on what the weather is like here.
Yes.
And then we've got Merrill. He said, just throwing my question out there, was the polygamy and sometimes incest to an extent necessary for the Christ bloodline and 12 tribes, and for what purpose? Great question. Do I think it was necessary? No. I think, to answer it succinctly, God uses broken stuff and he brings something beautiful out of the mess. But we are going to get into the 12 tribes and bloodlines and these other things as we go along the way. Esteban, good to hear from you. All right, so going on in chapter 29. Now, so Jacob comes. He shows how strong he is, and he's very attracted towards Rachel. And Laban is the father of both Leah and Rachel. And now it gives some interesting description, right? In verse 17, it says, "And Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful of form and face." So do you want to be our urban dictionary and give us a description of this Old Testament description and what that means in modern day?
Okay, you're gonna get me in trouble. Okay, we talked about this before. Let's put it this way. I did a little dive on this, and I saw that the word actually means Leah's eyes were beautiful. Others that say weak, I think they're looking for a reason why. I think Leah's eyes being weak was the equivalent of someone saying, well, she has a really good personality.
but
so I will just say what I said earlier, and then if they want to censor me later, they can. Leah probably had the most beautiful eyes, but the rest of her was woof. and so that was it. I mean, why did it take so long? She didn't get, she was the oldest. Mm-hmm. The culture was the oldest had to get married first. Yeah. For 7 years. She had no suitors, obviously. She didn't get married for those 7 years that Jacob was working for Rachel. Something was going on.
Yeah.
And we see through Scripture how important beauty was to the men of Scripture.
Yeah. So now we see this relationship develop between Jacob and Laban. And I actually think it's kind of ironic because Jacob is deceptive. We know that. And it's almost like he meets his match. It's kind of like, all right, God's like, I'm going to give you a taste of your own medicine.
Yeah.
And so now we see this deception kind of begin to unfold between Jacob and Laban and this really dysfunctional relationship between him and his father-in-law.
Yeah.
So go with that. Explain a little bit more about what that deception looks like that we see in chapter 29 here.
Well, it's pretty interesting because Laban is the brother of Rebekah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Rebekah was no innocent person. She was just as deceitful as her brother. they grew up in deceit, obviously, and they carried this through, and they got their way through deceit. And the deceit that was going on here was Laban knew. I mean, he basically used his daughter as a pawn.
Mm-hmm.
He knew he would get a good worker. He knew there would be success. In fact, later on, Laban says, I've been blessed by God because of you.
Yeah.
Now, he may have realized that early on, and then he used his daughter deceitfully to trick him into working all that time, and then another 7 years there. So it was like most deceit, it was self-serving.
Yep.
It was self-aggrandizing. It had to deal with profit and money. Had nothing to do with whether he really loved his daughters or his future son-in-law.
Yeah. And it's really kind of sad. So in verse 31, so Jacob has been tricked into marrying Leah. And in verse 31, it says, now the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, and he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. And it really is kind of sad, because you see this theme and also this competition that happens between Leah and Rachel. One of them basically saying, I'm more loved and more beautiful, and the other one saying, but I got more kids.
Yeah.
And it's kind of this twisted competition that takes place. Now, I'm going to approach this subject, and I'm just kind of opening up Pandora's box.
Okay.
We might not want to go super far into it.
Okay.
But in Old Testament time, children were very much seen as a blessing.
Yes.
Nowadays, children are very much seen in many ways as a curse.
Yeah.
And it's like, kids are holding you back from real life. And we kind of redefine, what is that real life? It's not, not having to put our money into other people, not having to put our time into raising children. And it should be this blessing thing. Shouldn't be a competition like
Right.
this is. But it is supposed to be a blessing. At what point, you have a few more decades than me, at what point did you see a churn take place where children became this curse or this thing that holds us back from adulthood instead of one of the greatest blessings of life?
Yeah. I can't put the finger on it, of course. If I could, I'd be a very rich man, and I'd have all these wonderful books and all that. But something shifted where and maybe it didn't shift. In the early days of our country, we wanted a lot of children because we needed someone to work on the farm. And so in some way, even though children were a blessing, they became
It's a resource.
A resource.
Too.
Yeah, that's perfect. Well, now as we moved into the 20th century, 21st century, we're not on farms, we're not on all these things. In some way, the mindset changed to what you said. What good are these kids? I'm not getting anything out of this. And now I'm having kids, and I'd rather have a new car, or I'd rather have, I can't take this job because of that. And so they went from being a resource, which I don't know if it was any better, but at least there was value given to them, to now they've become the burden and the curse. So Wolf of Wall Street and all these movies that began to talk about the accumulation of money and status and all those things. Children became a hindrance to that somewhere. 90s, 2000, with that. And now we see, of course, the statistics tell us that young adults are getting married later, and some are having children even later because they want to set their career in place, and then they want children when it would seem to benefit them most.
Yep.
And so again, we are opening Pandora's box because there's all sorts of sides to that. But children in some way have become a pawn, we'll use that word again, for our better life. Yeah.
To maybe kind of just bring this point to an end, at sometimes, even if you have different feelings, you got to take the Bible for what it says.
Yeah.
And it says that children are a blessing. It says that children are a great inheritance. And so for those that are thinking about having kids, getting married, all of that, as a father of four, it is one of my greatest blessings. Is it difficult? Of course it is. Do you lose sleep? And is it an investment? It is. But it is also a huge blessing. And I know the biggest blessing will be not now. It'll be later when I get to be a grandpa and have grandkids and great grandkids. It'll be something that will continue to pay, even though I'm in the investment stage now.
Correct.
But later on, I'll be able to pull out from that investment when my family grows.
Yeah, there's nothing like grandkids. Okay, so you know, but I think there's no greater pleasure in my life, and I'm going to get emotional here, than to see the kids that I invested in grow and become a man and woman of God. And they're raising their kids the same way. And so, again, Jordan, my son, always laughs, said, Dad, remember, I'm going to pick your nursing home and all that stuff. But it's, and there's some truth to that. But what a blessing it has been that, and I didn't look at it as work when I was raising the kids. It was hard, and there were situations that came up that were difficult. But I tell you, when you see your kids, that you prayed for them and you prayed for their spouses before my kids ever even thought of dating, I was praying for who they were going to marry, and how faithful God is to give them that. And well, I'm just going to be a blubbering mess if I keep on. But I tell you, there's no greater joy. There is no greater joy than to see your kids follow the Lord. Yeah.
We got a few comments there. Kids are the best part of life. Huge gift from God. From a mother of 5, children are our biggest blessing. I agree.
Yeah.
Found out he was blessed from Jacob, learned by divination. Okay, so moving on. Chapter 30. We see this now, this competition take rise between Rachel and Leah. In very much, they often viewed it as a blessing or even kind of a curse of like open womb, closed womb. And now we get into this mandrake argument.
Yes.
All right. So we get to, now if you're reading this for the first time, you're like, what is going on? So in verse 14, or chapter 30, verse 14, it says, now in those days of wheat harvest, Reuben went and found mandrakes, so Leah's firstborn, Reuben, and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. But she said to her, is it a small matter for you to take my husband? And would you also take my son's mandrakes? So Rachel said, he may lie with you tonight, talking about their husband, in return for your son's mandrakes. So they make this twisted deal, and now the kids are getting involved in this dysfunction as well. Now we did a little bit of a deep dive, and we've got some background for you in regards to mandrakes. So do you want to let them know, and I'll show them the picture.
I'll start, and we'll go. First of all, mandrakes were rare, okay, and obviously these were growing in the wild. You didn't go, at least here, you didn't plant mandrakes, but in that culture, they considered mandrakes an aid to fertility. And so it was important to them that if they found mandrakes, that if your womb was closed or if you had trouble to conceive, mandrakes did the trick. A little bit. The mandrakes actually have hallucinogenic chemicals in it. It's kind of like you get high while you're doing mandrakes. And so Leah, whose womb was very fertile, and Rachel, who was not, there became that battle. With the mandrakes, and the reason because Rachel looked at it as a way to conceive.
So I got a picture here of the mandrakes, and it's kind of funny because if you look at it, doesn't it kind of look like
a man,
little people? With this kind of flower head, and so you can kind of see, it almost has like the arms and the legs, and so they create this agreement. And sure enough, so then Jacob comes in from the field, and in the evening, and then Leah goes out to meet him.
It's a great introduction from work, right?
And she says, "You must come into me, for I have surely hired you with my son's mandrakes."
Yeah.
And so he lay with her that night. Yeah. Now, very interesting interaction. I kind of have a feeling that based on the fact that Jacob has multiple wives and multiple handmaids or servants that he ends up sleeping with, I don't think he's really pushing back too much.
No.
But you can start to see, okay, we're getting layers deeper and deeper into dysfunction.
Yeah.
And then we just kind of see it keep snowballing and getting worse.
And it's obvious that well, I think it's obvious that Jacob has spent very little time with Leah for her to do this. And we were talking before we got on the air here about how Leah, every time she had a child, she would say, well, now my husband will love me.
Mm-hmm.
Now my husband will appreciate me. Now my husband. And so, again, this was... Wait, you said that person who wants to be loved so much, she'll go through anything in order to be loved.
Yep.
And to the point of basically purchasing her husband.
Yeah.
And or give their handmaids. That was another, we talked about the maidservants and
Yeah.
maybe you want to elaborate on the maidservants.
It is sad, like you were talking about, that it's the difference between our kind of twisted love and manipulative love that we often use in relationships versus the kind of unconditional love that God gives us. Is we view love as something that you earn. It's like, well, okay, my husband isn't attracted, so therefore if I give him children, then I can earn his love in that way. But really, this way we're supposed to be loving each other is we love them for who they are and who God created them to be, including their imperfections, including their shortcomings. And it's something that, as a father, I try to be aware of. I'm a competitive person.
Yeah.
My wife's very competitive. One of my sons is very competitive. And so that comes in, but I want to never, have any of my kids think that, if you are a better athlete or a better reader or a better this, that somehow I will love you more, you know? And in fact, I have a high standard for them in terms of accomplishments that I want them to have, but I actually try to create, like, what I tell them, like, I want their identity be separate. I'm not going to love you anymore whether you pass or fail this test.
Right.
I'm not going to love you any more or less based on whether you did or didn't score a soccer goal. Because the natural inclination, and I can already see it with my boys, so now they're starting to compete with each other, and then based on who wins, they come in and they're like, Dad, guess who won? Guess who scored how many touchdowns? And it's already, and so I have to be careful as the father how much I feed into that. And I guess kind of what I see from Jacob, I don't think that he fed into it. I think he was apathetic to it.
Exactly. I don't think he paid no attention to it whatsoever.
I think he just went out to the fields and kind of like, you figure out your stuff. And, so that sin of apathy was really Adam's first sin.
Yeah.
He had really sinned before he took a bite of the fruit because he had already stayed back and been apathetic as the serpent came in and started tempting his wife.
Yeah.
He stood there and did nothing. And so that's the sin of men that we fall into, the sin of apathy.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to deal with the issue, and so I'm just going to sit on the couch.
Yeah.
I want to deal with issues, so I'm going to go into the garage and fiddle. And,
Wow.
And so we become apathetic because we don't want to put in the energy to fixing the problem in the right way.
Wow, that's good. That's good. I feel convicted now. So I won't say anything from here.
So now we start to see something develop. And, so we went from Abraham and Sarah, and then to Isaac and Rebekah, and now you get to Jacob, who gets renamed as Israel. And now you have, he has kids, which end up being the 12 tribes of Israel, but from 4 different women. And so Leah, his first wife, and he has 6 children with her.
Yep.
Rachel, his second wife, 2 children with her. But then he ends up sleeping with Leah's maidservant or concubine, however you want to kind of put it, Zilpah, and has 2 kids with her. And then, because Rachel's competing for having the most kids too, she's like, well, here, have my maidservant as well. And Bilhah. And so then he has 2 with there. So 2 with Rachel, 2 with Bilhah, 2 with Zilpah, and 6 with Leah.
It's amazing. Can I dig deeper into the competition they had when Leah had when Rachel gave Bilhah to Jacob, Dan was the product of that. Dan means I'm vindicated, I'm judged. Leah down the road gives birth to Jacob's only daughter that we know of, Dinah. Guess what that means? I've been vindicated. The male form of Dan. Now Leah's going, hey, I've been vindicated. That I tell you, you're so right. All that just weaving in to the dysfunction of the relationship.
Yeah,
man.
So a question in regards to this, as we start to see this family, tree kind of envelop. So, why did Jesus come from the line of Leah and not Rachel? I don't have I don't have an answer to this. I'm just kind of bringing it up, maybe seeing if God gives us insight in the moment, and or just seeing if where we go with this. But so Leah was his first wife, but he didn't love her as much. He loved Rachel more. And but Jesus came from the line of Judah, which was one of the sons of Leah.
Leah. I'm going to go to some pop psychology here a little bit. God always, it seems like God frequently lifts up the underdog, right? I mean, Jacob wasn't supposed to receive the birthright, but he did. And as you go through, it's always the underdog that God seems to bless or gives favor. Well, there's no bigger underdog than Leah. She's not loved by her husband and all that. And
as you put it, woof.
Boy, I tell you.
I'm sorry. We're getting ourselves into trouble.
Pastor's going to have a talk with me.
We mean no offense.
But it's interesting. So Leah had Reuben, and she said, surely my husband, I talked about this, will love me now. She had Simeon, her second. She's still not loved, but God has given me another son. Third, now at last, Levi, now at last my husband will become attracted to me. Then when she had Judah, she basically said, forget it. I will just praise the Lord. That's why his name Judah.
Yeah.
And so, maybe through all of that, God said, here we go. We're going to talk about the praise part of things. So that's my off the top of the head pop psychology type thing with that.
Yeah, that's good. So now we get into kind of chapters 30 and 31, now that we're done with the whole mandrake scene.
The mandrake stuff.
And now Jacob is ready to separate ways from Laban. And he wants to kind of go be on his own and really kind of runs and kind of does it secretly because he doesn't want to deal with what he knows is going to be the conversation and everything that he has with Laban. Something that stood out to me is in chapter 31, verse 24.
Okay.
God came to Laban, the Aramean, in a dream of the night and said to him, be careful that you do not speak to Jacob, either good or bad.
Yeah.
And so Laban is pursuing Jacob.
Right.
In a somewhat aggressive way. He's bringing men. This is not going to be a happy and healthy interchange of, I just wanted to give you a hug goodbye. He's coming to challenge Jacob and saying, why would you sneak out? And I don't think that Laban was a great guy. I think he was very aggressive, and we know he was manipulative.
And what was going on? His sons were saying, "Hey, Dad, Jacob has taken all of our inheritance. Jacob has taken all of our money. Jacob has taken," and so he is coming with that aggression.
Yeah, and so it is not out of the realm in my mind that he might even have a plan to come and do something violently. We don't know for sure. But so, anyways, God visits him in a dream. As Laban is catching up to Jacob. And I just think it's interesting the way that it's worded. Be careful that you do not speak to Jacob either good or bad. And the thing that I find interesting is, well, why did you include the good portion? And what I think about is basically what God's saying is, I don't want you to interfere, Laban. I don't want you to go and give a bunch of false, whatever, and maybe try to draw him this way. I don't want you to go and speak ill of him. Like, I am bringing him in a direction. I don't want you to interfere. What do you think about that?
I like that because Jacob's going to have to make the decision. I was thinking of the good and bad as you were talking about it, and this is how Laban would do things. He'd either over flatter the good and try to win Jacob over, or he would be very aggressive and negative and push Jacob away. But to your point, it wasn't up to Laban to decide which way he was going to go. And I've never thought of it that way. So that's a great way to look at God as saying, hands off, this is between me and Jacob.
Yeah.
Laban, you're just sort of, a character in the play and not a very important one at this point.
So something that we as a church and pastors believe in is prophecy and being prophetic. So there's times where God will give you, in a sense, kind of like a supernatural word or encouragement meant for someone at a specific time. It's more than a compliment. I can be like, hey, I love your green shirt. But that's not going to feed you in any kind of spiritual way. You'll just feel good about yourself for 4 seconds. and then move on. But when we prophesy over people and we encourage them, it's this word that God gives us and we share to it. And something that I've noticed a lot of times is there's this thing inside of us that wants to elaborate on what God gives. And so God gives us a word, we share the word, and then either I want to make it more flowery. I want to add in my own interpretations and suggestions, and like God didn't do enough.
Right.
And then even sometimes the person will be like, well, what does that mean? And I've gotten much better as I've gotten older. I say the word, and then, and I leave it there, and then I don't add my own 2 cents in. And even if they ask me for it, I'm like, go ask God.
Yeah.
It's his word. I'm just the spokesperson.
Yeah, that's good.
And so I kind of view that too, of like, I don't need to interfere. I was just a spokesperson for God. I gave you this word, and I'm not going to interfere anymore, because now this is kind of between you and God.
Yeah, and that, it's good, because as we deal with the prophetic and there's negative, positive, you could have a whole forum of prophetic, and people will talk good about it or bad about it. But when we deal with the prophetic in the way that you talked about, that God has an encouraging word for someone, it's up to the person hearing it to determine if it was a word from God.
Yep.
And so I can sense, I believe God wants you to hear this, Pastor Zach, and I will give you that word. But it doesn't matter what I really feel. It matters whether you receive it and you, like you said, consult with God. Said, is this really for me, or was Gerard just off, jumping off the bridge? And so we sometimes, when we deal with the prophetic, or if the prophetic is moving, we sometimes blame the prophet when God said, well, you didn't discern that. You didn't question that. You need to make sure that what you have heard is from me, because guess what? We're human.
Yep.
We're going to make mistakes. We'll expound or we'll add when God doesn't want us to do that.
Yeah.
So
that's good. We're about halfway through. If you've got questions, please just type those comments in. We'll try to answer those questions along the way. And so we've got a question. It says, what's the significance of the stolen and buried idols? Okay. Which I think we are about to that point.
We are to that point. Actually, I have it highlighted here and things.
Just so they can help follow along too in the scripture. What chapter and verse?
We're Genesis 31, between 13 and 40, because that's where my. Let me see here.
Yes. Yep. So this is now, Jacob has run away. Laban's now caught up. They kind of figure out, and come to some sort of agreement. But one thing that Laban is mad about is that someone stole his household idols,
gods. Yeah.
Household gods. And Jacob doesn't know anything about it. But we know from scripture that Rachel was the one.
Yeah.
And she took them. And she did it out of spite. And again, dysfunctional family. She was kind of mad that basically her dad had kind of treated them as property. She knew that her dad had used them to try to milk Jacob and the favor that got on his life to try to make him more rich. And so they saw the manipulation.
Yeah.
And they probably grew up in it. And so they noticed it very easily. So out of spite, she takes these household gods.
It's very, very interesting. This is the one time in the story that Leah and Rachel agree. They both said, "Hey, our dad." Okay, so she's taken these household idols. I want to know what those were. There's actually a name for them. They're called teraphim, and it was not something. It was a cultural thing. It wasn't just Laban's family that did it. It was a cultural thing, that the household gods, and it was a pagan exercise. So we talk about, the god of rain, the god of mandrakes, the god of this, the god of that.
Mandrake sales are going to go through the roof after this.
Exactly.
After this, yeah.
Exactly. I hope we get commission on that. But they were idols. But one of the some of the research I did said that was that these idols were used in a syncretic fashion. In other words, they took pagan ritual here with those idols, added in to their worship of God, and they mixed the two.
Yep.
And so Laban was upset because they had value, for one, but it was also his way of worshiping whatever. And so it was, you had said earlier, and you're going to say it much better than I'm just going to say it now. Sometimes we do the same thing. We mix how we worship God with things of this world.
Yeah. When we take this, you take the word holiness. Holiness means to be set apart. That's what we're supposed to be. We're to be set apart. And that's this call that God places on the Israelites throughout the Old Testament. He's constantly trying to set them apart and saying, I'm going to give you a promised land, and I will be your God, and you will be my people, and you will be holy and set apart, and people will see that you are different by the way that you live and the way that you worship. And but that requires discipline. It requires a fixation of our focus on God. But we do what they did. We get distracted. Well, I know I'm supposed to be set apart, but is it really that bad if I just do this as well? And so we step out of what we were supposed to be, of being set apart and being holy, and we go and grab onto these other things that are oftentimes unholy, and then we try to worship God through those things or with those things. And we say, well, God, will you still accept this? And the truth is, no, he won't.
Right.
And this is, I think, one of the biggest falsities that I've seen that Christians have fallen into. God will just accept whatever I give him. No, he won't. He's God, and he demands our first and our best.
Yeah.
Because he's God. He's God Almighty. And so he's like, if you want to have all these other gods, then I'm not going to be your God. He's not this dog at the end of the table that we push him our scraps. And then we just expect him to be like, oh, thank you for giving me something. Yeah. And we have this approach to him where it's just, he should be thankful for whatever we give him. And man, like, do we have this power dynamic wrong where we view ourselves on top and God down here, and God's up here. And he's called us to a life of holiness. And holiness doesn't mean comfort. There will be things that we have to uncomfortably separate from.
Yes. Because
they're things of the world. And there are things that draw us away. And it's just an uncomfortable truth that we have to get more and more comfortable with, that we are called to be sacred and holy and set apart. And that's a very unsexy talking point.
It's daunting. Yes.
And no one's like, oh, you know what? I just woke up and I just feel like I want to be more sacred and holy and set apart. No, it's difficult because it means you need to let go of a lot of selfish desires or passions and instead pursue God. Here's
one of the things as we're pursuing God, like you said, we kind of use, so Rachel and Laban, they use the teraphim, the household gods, as a substitute. And the reason why God said, don't make any graven image of me, don't worship any of that. Just, we always talk about putting God on the shelf. They could literally take their teraphim, put it on the shelf. And then when they needed the teraphim, to take them off the shelf. And it's cliche, and we say it, but we do the same thing with God. I'm going to put God here. I'm going to live my life. And then when I need God, I'm going to take him off the shelf. I'm going to go to church 4 Sundays in a row, and I'm going to earn my favor back with God. And then when things are well, I shall put God back on the shelf. And that's kind of what's going on here. Now, the deceit carries with Rachel here because Laban, of course, searches. Jacob says, well, if you can find who stole the idols, they'll be dead. Yeah. Like that. And I tell you, this family.
Something else.
Yeah. Rachel hides the idols that she stole, sits on them, and says, oh, Dad, I'm sorry, I'm going through my period right now.
That time of the month.
I can't get up. And he says, oh, okay. And then they run away with the idols. So it's...
Now we're going to come back to that because the idols come up again in a few chapters.
Yes.
In a significant way. Yes. And so we go from one aggressive interaction with Jacob and Laban to another one. So now as Jacob is leaving and he does truly part ways with Laban wasn't able to find the household gods.
Can I give my wife a shout out before we go?
Yeah.
Okay. There's a verse here as Laban and Jacob are parting.
I didn't know we were allowed shout outs.
Sorry. Hey, honey. She's probably not even listening. Right? Doesn't matter. She says, oh, Pastor James isn't on there. I'm not going to listen. It's just my husband. I hear him every day. When we were planting our church, and I was a tent maker, it wasn't rare that I would get up at 6 a.m. and we'd be back till 10 at night. I was coaching, I was doing all these things. Didn't matter what time of day. When I would get up and leave, she would shout. She'd say, "May the Lord watch between me and thee while we're absent one from another." Well, that's exactly what Laban says to Jacob here. And so Patty took this here, and every time we parted, she would say, "May the Lord watch between me and thee while we're absent from one another." Yeah. And then when I got home, she always had a candle burning. And she said, "Just blow the candle out when you're here. Yeah. I'm remembering you through the day." So Patty, what a blessing you are.
Yeah.
So
that's cool.
Okay, keep going.
So chapter 32, now Jacob has this fearful and aggressive interaction with Esau. Yeah. And so remember the way that Jacob and Esau left each other. Jacob deceived him of his birthright. He stole his blessing. And Esau was rightfully angry, but to the point that he was murderously angry. Yeah. And that's because then Jacob's mother is like, "We got to get you out of here because your brother's going to kill you." Mm-hmm. And so now they're having this interaction. He's about to see Esau again. He's fearful. He kind of splits up his wives and his camps into different groups, and he brings different amounts of the livestock as kind of like a peace offering. And I thought it was funny in verse 15. It says 30 milking camels. Have you ever milked a camel? I've not.
Never milked a camel.
I've milked a cow before.
That's right.
Never milked a camel. And so anyways, they're going, and then the interaction is very different than what he expected. If I remember correctly, the verse it says that he laid on his neck, they embraced, and they began basically crying, and that Esau laid on the neck of Jacob.
Wow.
It was a very different experience,
an
that he was
affectionate
an affectionate one.
When I read this interchange, Esau seems like the more put together of the two.
Yeah,
he seemed more confident. He seemed, here's, hey, no problem. No, you don't need to give me that stuff and all that. He just seemed, whether he had resolved whatever enmity he had, he just seemed the more confident of the two. And Jacob, who had promised time and time and time after again from God, Jacob, who before this interaction reminded God, "Oh, hey God, by the way, you said you're going to make me a great nation, right? Yeah. Do you remember that?" He's moving in fear, and Esau seems to be moving in confidence. And
seems like Jacob's always using the get out of jail free card, where it's kind of like, "Oh, I got to use another one." God, remember, and he keeps having to kind of remind God, because he's putting himself in situations, or situations from his past are revisiting him. Yeah. It's like God will forgive you, but it doesn't mean that you don't still deal with the consequences.
Yeah, that's good.
And that's what I know a lot of Christians struggle with. So they live a certain life, or they make some mistakes, like we all do. Yep. And then they give their life over to God, and they're following now in obedience. And they just think that it means that all the consequences of the past go away, and that's not the case. No. You're forgiven, but again, you can jump off a cliff and you can ask for forgiveness on your way down, and God will forgive you. Doesn't mean you won't still hit the bottom. Correct. And so consequences don't go away. And so these consequences are revisiting Jacob from his deceptive lifestyle.
I think Jacob just figures everyone's going to react the way he would react. Mm-hmm. Yep. Because this is, so when he's meeting Esau, he said, "Well, I know I would,
I know what I would do in this situation."
And it goes, and so it's pretty, but it all worked out in the end, I guess, for lack of a better way.
Yeah. To say it. So we get into the second part of chapter 32, and this can be a very confusing part. It's kind of just stuck in there, where Jacob wrestles with God. Yep. And so now this actually brings up, we're going to explain to you some words, theophany or Christophany. Mm-hmm. You want to go into that a little bit and explain to the people listening some details?
I will. In the Old Testament, and I guess, well, even today, I guess we could say, there are these sightings, I guess is a better way to put it, that we would call theophanies. And these would be God, Pastor always says God in a bod. In a way, a God in a bod we don't recognize him as God, but the interaction that happens, that takes place, means that God has come down to relate to us. So we talk about Melchizedek. The scholars consider him a theophany. This was God that was coming, and he was Melchizedek. Or when Moses later on sees God passing by. God's a spirit. He doesn't have a body. God's a spirit. But Moses was able to see God in a bodily form. So that's what a theophany is. Now a Christophany, which is a new term for me, because I was King James Version guy, and now this is New Version guy. A Christophany is when Christ, the Son of God, comes and presents himself. And he doesn't say, I'm the Son of God, but the interaction that takes place says, oh, that was the Son of God. And if we look back, and so those, I don't know if prevalence are the right word, but there's enough of them in the Old Testament, both Christophany and Theophany, to say, we sometimes look at God as uninterested in the Old Testament. He's just as involved.
Yeah. And going off of that, like, God loves to interact with his creation.
Yeah.
And that's what we see here. Like, I love this story. So in verse 24, it says, then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When he saw that he had not prevailed against him, he touched the socket of his thigh. So the socket of Jacob's thigh was dislocated when he wrestled with him. Then he said, let me go, for the dawn is breaking. But he said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. And so God comes down, and he's interacting. Now, for those of you that are reading through the Bible in a year, something that sometimes can be a little confusing is you'll see this phrase of God, or it might say angel of the Lord. And sometimes it's hard to know, is this an angel or is this God?
Right.
And but there's some little tips that can help. One of the things is whether blessing and or worship is allowed or asked for. And so when you see an angel appear to Mary, a common response was that, the human would either be afraid and or that they would worship him. Now, if it's an angel, the angel's not going to accept worship. Say, I'm a messenger. Don't accept worship from me. But if worship is accepted, and or if blessing is happening, then oftentimes it gives us contextual clues.
Wow.
And so God decides that, on this day, he's going to interact with his creation in a different way. And God, like persistence moves the heart of God. Yeah, it just does. And so God comes down, and it doesn't give us a whole lot of detail. So, God comes and they just start wrestling at some point. I have to assume there must have been some kind of a disagreement or what led up to this. We don't know.
We don't know.
But anyways, they end up having this wrestling match, and then God being God, just kind of like, boom, I win. Touches his hip, but Jacob has this stubborn persistence, and I think that God really admired it.
Yes.
I really think he admires when we are stubbornly persistent in our pursuit of prayer and blessings. And so he's like, I'm not letting you go unless you bless me.
Yeah. It's an interesting interchange because I don't think God was looking to show his superiority over his creation here. I mean, because really he could have come down in 1 second and went, there, you're done. I think he did want to see how far would Jacob go. Jacob had to know he was not going to win. Yeah. When you get to that point, not like I've been in a lot of fights, but you get to that point where you realize I'm not going to win this thing. Yep. Jacob had to know that, but he kept going on. And again, the way you expressed it was so good that God was kind of like impressed that Jacob would not stop. And God had to stop it because Jacob was in pursuit. If we can look at this as our pursuit of God and the pursuit of his blessing, no matter what the struggle is, I think God brings favor to us when that happens. And maybe we walk away with a limp, but we also walk away with the blessing of God. So.
Yeah, that's good. So then Jacob and Esau, they end up meeting, and they make it right with one another. And in chapter 33, verse 10, it really stood out to me. Jacob said, "No, please, now, if I have found favor in your sight, then take my present from my hand. For I see your face as one sees the face of God." And so, they didn't view God in a fearful way. They viewed God as a way of, he's a God who looks upon his people with generosity and love. And so when he went and approached Esau in fear, not knowing if Esau was going to now, kill him, instead Esau responded as if the face of God, with generosity and love towards him. Now we get to chapter 34. We got 10 minutes left.
Okay.
And we have to get into this story of Dinah, and we also have to get back to the idols so we can bring that full circle.
I don't know how your chapter 34 is labeled, but mine is Dinah and the Shechemites. Okay. Sounds like an R&B group from the 60s. That's the first thing I thought about, so I got to get that out of there.
Dibs on that as a name.
Yeah. This is wow, this is I don't even know why it's in here. I get perplexed sometimes when I look at this, because in the end it comes out with a curse against Levi and Simeon. Dinah is well, some say she wasn't raped, that maybe she I can't shame the victim, but complicit in this. It wasn't a rape. She was in a situation that he saw her and took her and didn't resist. And so that's what some say. Some say she was raped, violated, or whatever that is there. And it was wrong.
Yes.
Yeah, it was wrong. And Levi and Simeon, when they came out of the fields, they were hopping mad to this. And but later on, they're cursed by Jacob when he gives a blessing at the end. He calls them instruments of violence, Levi and Simeon. And it's interesting as you dig deeper, as they went through all this mess and really sticking up for the honor of their sister.
Yeah.
I mean, a noble thing to do, that when the land was divided for the promised land, Levi ended up with no land whatsoever because they were going to be the priestly. God was their inheritance, so he had no borders. And Simeon ended up inside of Judah. So Judah had their borders, but Simeon was like an amoeba inside there. So the curse went to there. I don't understand. I think they did they were deceitful in how they avenged, but isn't it the right thing?
It's a story of, something terrible happens, and then how do you respond to something terrible that happens? And this is one of those difficult ones, because you're trying to draw the line of what constitutes an overreaction.
Yeah.
And so basically, she is visiting the daughters of the land, which she probably shouldn't have been doing, Dinah, on her end, because again, they were supposed to be set apart. And but anyways, then it says that this guy came in, laid with her by force. Obviously, then her siblings get really mad, and they're this other group of people that disgraced her and raped her. They're trying to say, they're trying to say, well, let intermarry with us. Let me now marry her since I violated her. Intermarry with us. Basically, this invitation for comfort and compromise. And like, okay, this wasn't great, but let's try to make it better. And here, you can have some of our daughters too, and this back and forth. And so then what you have is then this this deceit happens. And so the brothers say, well, hey, if you go circumcise yourselves, we can't intermarry with you unless you do this. So then these grown men, they go and circumcise themselves or each other, however they go about that. And it says,
don't want to know.
I think it's on day 3, it says they're laying there in pain. They come in and they murder them all.
Yeah.
And so part of you is like, hey, you had your sister's back. You upheld her honor. But then the other part of it is like, okay, well, how far is too far?
Yeah.
You deceitfully did it, and also you murdered all the guys, not just the guy who did the action. And so it brings up, but I think what it goes to show is our natural inclination is to not want to wait for justice or allow God to determine justice. We take justice into our own hands, and we say, I'm going to go and I'm going to decide what justice looks like. And Jacob, it says at the end of the chapter to Simeon and Levi, you brought trouble on me by making me odious among the inhabitants of the land. And And so it's this really uncomfortable story. It's a really uncomfortable chapter where it just seems like, is Jacob trying to get out of, is he trying to take the easy way? The brothers, okay, you shouldn't kill people, but they also had some good intention, right? Dinah, terrible thing that happened to her, how does she feel about all of this? And, and then when she was avenged, did it make her feel better or no? Like it just seems like one of those kind of terrible
altogether.
Yeah.
I think your point of apathy from Jacob comes into play here, because he doesn't do anything to avenge Dinah. This is Dad. He doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
And when Levi and Simeon come, their father's apathy may have caused them to go to there. Yeah. And that quote you said at the end of the chapter, Jacob was more mad that he now had a bad reputation with the Shechemites.
He was worried how it would affect him.
Than
the honor of his daughter.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. And so,
parents,
we need to live honorable lives so our sons and daughters will live honorable lives.
Yeah.
And it's so important.
That's good. So in chapter 35, Jacob moves to Bethel. Now look at verse 4. This is where we come full circle with this idol thing. So they gave to Jacob all the foreign gods which they had, and the rings which were in their ears, and Jacob hid them under the yoke which was near Shechem. So Jacob kind of re-ups his covenant and commitment to God. He's really trying to purify his life, purify his pursuit. And so he goes and in all of his household, it's not a household in the way that you and I think. It's not a household with like it's me and Amy and 4 kids. We've got many kids, we've got many servants, we've got a lot of livestock, it's a lot of people. And so he goes in and they begin pulling out all of these gods, these idols. And it kind of, at first, it brings up the idea of, well, why were all of these there in the first place?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you remember, well, guess what? Laban had gods. And who took those gods? Rachel took those gods. And then guess what? Rachel had kids. Why wouldn't the kids worship and have the same gods that their mom had?
Yeah.
And so you can see generation from generation about how those previous idols or gods can continue even in the life of a believer until someone decides and says no more, and they go through their house. Okay. And right now I'm kind of talking about a house metaphorically,
right?
Talking about everything spiritually, where you take spiritual inventory of everything that you've allowed inside your brain and your heart and your home and your relationships, and you take spiritual inventory and you say, that's an idol, I'm cutting it out.
Wow.
That's a false god, I'm getting rid of that. And you get rid of those things, and you do the difficult thing of putting in the work to do so.
It's kind of like we're spiritual hoarders. And anything spiritual we put in there, keep it. We don't dare let it go.
Yeah.
Until A&E and Discovery shows up with a camera.
It is interesting. We're drawn to the supernatural, both good and bad.
Yes.
There's a spirit side of us, and so we're very intrigued by it. Just spiritual things in general, we're drawn towards. But it's a great way of, like, we are drawn towards the good and the bad, though, and we just kind of take it all in.
Yep.
And God's like, you are spiritual, and there's spiritual experiences and things, but there's also a side of the spiritual stuff that you should not hold on to either. All right, we are in our final minutes. I'm going to give just a couple of little bullet points that stood out to me as we kind of get to the end. Chapter 35, verse 8, Deborah. We know nothing about her, but she gets mentioned in here, and she is mourned. And so how beautiful is it that there's this random person who's kind of a nurse or a maid or a helper, but she gets named in here, and they weep over her because of how much she meant to them. In verse 11, be fruitful and multiply. This reference back to Genesis 1:28, the very first command that God gives mankind of be fruitful and multiply. You get towards kind of the end, and now Rachel, she's dying in labor, and she's giving birth to Benjamin, and she names him Ben-Oni, and Jacob ends up changing his name to Benjamin.
Right.
And so there was a name change. She wanted to name him Son of My Sorrow. As she's dying, and he actually changed it and said, Son of My Right Hand. And I think it was a good move on his part for how often he was apathetic. Instead of being the sorrow of, you coming to life, but your mom dying, instead he changed it and gave him a new name.
That's great.
In verse 22, it came about while Israel was dwelling in that land that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard of it. Again, continued dysfunction. Reuben actually loses his place and influence as the firstborn. And we see that now going into with Joseph in chapter 37. And they get to the point where Joseph is being unwise. And he's basically saying like, hey, God's giving me these visions and dreams that I'm going to be over you. And don't do that with your siblings. Not wise.
Older siblings anyway. Yeah.
And so the siblings, they decide that they're actually going to kill Joseph. They're going to murder him. And Reuben kind of tries talking him out of it. But you actually see from that point on, that point when Reuben slept with the concubine or the wife of his father, at that point, Reuben loses his influence as the firstborn. And so you can see that even in this, they no longer listen to him. They're like, oh, wait, you have advice? Aren't you the person who slept with, with dad's, and so they no longer respect him. They no longer uphold him as this place that he had as the firstborn.
It's interesting. Let's go back to when Dinah was raped. Wasn't Reuben the oldest that avenged? It was Levi and Simeon. Maybe even that he continued with that. That's interesting. That's a great point.
Yeah. We're going to cap it there because we are at 2:00. There's always too much to talk about.
There is.
But we're now setting the stage, and we're going to get into a lot more of the story of Joseph, which the story of Joseph is great.
Amazing.
Something I want you to think about as you're reading these chapters over this next week. We often think of Joseph as the dreamer, and we refer to him as Joseph as the dreamer. But actually, his gift was not in the dreams. The dreams was just a setup to put him in the place where his true gift could be used. And I'm not going to tell you what that is,
right?
But you can figure it out as you are diving into the scripture reading. So we want to thank you for joining with us, and we hope that you tune in next week. We're going to be back to your regular hosts.
Yes.
And I don't think they will be talking about mandrakes or woofing.
Yeah.
And so we'll be back to Pastor James and Pastor Alex. But we've really enjoyed being with you these last couple of weeks, and continue to dig into the Word. Stick with it. I know that it can be difficult to find the time to go through this Bible in a year, but I've grown so much, and I want you to continue to grow in God's Word as well. So we'll sign off with that.
That's good.